Hey YouTube, this is Dennis here from Denny's Aquatics, and doing a video for you on my most common or my top 10 fish keeping mistakes. Got this idea actually from Ben Ochart, who did a video one time on hot tips or 10 tips to avoid disaster, and also Adam C did a video recently on his 3 biggest mistakes. And when I got to thinking about mine, I thought that I've got a lot more than 3 of them since 1983 when I started this hobby out. So I thought that I would share them with you, so that hopefully you can avoid making some of these mistakes yourself, or catch yourself when you're about to maybe make a mistake potentially. So let's get started. The first one, and probably the most common mistake that I think all of us make, is overfeeding. Overfeeding, a lot of times, I think as fish keepers, we think that every meal has to be, let's say, like a Thanksgiving Day feast for our fish, and give large feedings to the point where food is dropping into the sand all over the place, and the fish have to go down and get it, and so on. Overfeeding is probably the biggest, as well as feeding too many times a day. Now personally, I feed twice a day, but I feed kind of on the smaller side feedings, just enough where I know everybody's gotten some food. Probably the feeding lasts no more than 10 to 15 seconds, and I can see the smallest fish in the tank have gotten some food, because I know the biggest fish are definitely going to get the food. And I also watch for any fish that are hanging back that might not be coming up to feed, because that can indicate a potential problem. So overfeeding. The next one is overstocking a tank. I think it's widely accepted that fish keepers, especially African fish keepers, overstock a tank because they're trying to curb aggression. And to some extent, I think that there's some truth to that. However, what we do need to keep in mind is the potential growth rate of the fish that we got in there, especially if you're keeping haps. Now, my tank is filled with haps, and I have to take into account that some of those fish, or more than half of the fish that are in there, and I've never sat down and really counted them all. I want to say there's probably 16 or 17 in this 220. About half of them have the potential to grow 10 inches plus, where the others have maxed out in their growth at 6 to 8 inches. So overstocking and not taking into account their potential growth can be a problem, I think, for any fish keeper, not just African cichlids. Testing water frequently enough, especially when you're adding new fish. I think it's vitally important that once you take fish out of quarantine, that you make sure your water parameters are well within range where they should be, to avoid any kind of shock to the new arriving fish, because they're already going to be going and catching a few lumps going into a tank like mine, as being newbies in there. And making sure your water parameters are good before you put them in there would be another one. Number 4, buying fish on impulse. Now this is something that I'm definitely guilty of. Right when I think I'm totally at my limit or capacity of where I want to be, I see somebody like Butch Livingston put out a list, or the Cichlid Shack, or whoever, and they put out a list, and there's something on there that I just have to have, and I go ahead and buy another 1 or 2 more fish, add it to the mix, and overcrowd the tank too much when I know better, and then end up eventually having to rehome something, which is something I really don't like to do at all. So overstocking and, or I'm sorry, buying fish on impulse is another problem that I think we can have. Another one, number 5, is not understanding the nitrogen cycle. I think as a new fish keeper, many of us have gone through this, not understanding, how the ammonia turns to nitrite and nitrate turns to nitrate, and letting that cycle happen and being patient for that cycle to occur, because that can take anywhere from 16, 17 days all the way up to 3 or 4 weeks by the time it's completely gone through its cycle. I would say closer to 30 days to be safe. So understanding it, I remember when I was a young fish keeper, I added too many fish right off the bat, and my tank turned a milky white color, and was wondering why, and it ended up being something called new tank syndrome, which I'll never forget. But it stayed milky white for a couple of months afterwards before I was able to get rid of it, because I had put too many fish in too quickly before the tank had cycled. Another one that I am guilty of in the past is quarantining. I just recently opened up another tank, a 100-gallon tank, not too terribly long ago, that I use now for quarantining and meds and hospital tank. But in the past, I always did the flop and drop technique, which I think you should still do the flop and drop, but not straight from a breeder or straight from a online fish seller. I think that they need to be quarantined first, and then you can flop them in your tank, that way. I keep my tanks at the same temperature so that when I do have to remove one from quarantine and put it into the display tank, that it's at the same exact temperature. So quarantining. Leaving lights on too long. I think some of us, especially as new fish keepers, tend to leave our lights on too long, and then one of the common fish take or common questions that come up on Facebook on the groups I belong to is, how do I get rid of brown algae? And then when you go ahead and proceed to ask the fish keeper how long they keep their lights on a day, they proceed to tell you 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, all day, plus the sunlight is coming in there at the same time. And it's fine if you want to do that, but just be prepared to clean all that algae up. So for me, I keep the lights on about 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours in the evening. So a total of 8 hours a day in split time periods. So that's it for leaving the lights on too long. The next one was a lesson that I really learned not too long ago, is doing water changes while being impaired by either alcohol or drugs. And a prescription drugs is what I'm talking about. I had a couple of real serious back surgeries happen not too terribly long ago, and got through them, but I was on some hardcore narcotic painkillers for quite a while, several months, and did a water change one day and just forgot that I was doing a water change, and while I was filling the tank back up, left the house to go out shopping on this 220, because it does take quite a while to fill up, and lo and behold, I came home and had 4 inches of water in my basement floor, and destroyed 2 current USA lights, LED lights. The boxes for them got smoked by the light or by the water that flooded them out, and got to be an expensive lesson. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to be doing water changes, to have a clear frame of mind and not be impaired by anything. Number 9, keeping track of your temperature and not using cheap thermometers. Now, I had an incident many years ago where I was starting to lose fish. Couldn't figure out why. The first thing I did was check water parameters. That seemed to be okay. And the temperature on this, I think you're going to catch on now, but this stick-on thermometer, I think it read 80 to 82 degrees in that range. So everything appeared to be fine, and I didn't know what was going on. So after losing fish for a couple of days, I went to go net another dead fish, and it was down in the corner of the tank on a much smaller tank than this, and stuck my arm in the water, and I thought to myself, man, is that water warm? It felt like warm bath water. And lo and behold, I knew there was just no, I mean, for sure that, no denying it, that the heater had stuck on and that the thermometer was not accurate. So I immediately unplugged the thermometer, went out and got a more reliable thermometer, or I'm sorry, unplugged the heater, went out and got a more reliable thermometer, and found it to be 92 degrees in there. Left it unplugged for a while and let it just fall naturally, and didn't lose any more fish after that. So picked up a very good thermometer, one that just goes in there, the old school type with the mercury on it, and submerges into the tank, and never had a problem since. And then the last one is having a heater controller, and this is something that I did not know about until just like 5-6 months ago. Heater controllers can cut off the power going to your heaters once the temperature that you have the desired temperature that you have set on the controller has been reached. It will cut off the heater, and when it starts to fall below the desired temperature, it will kick the heater back on. So it keeps a constant temperature for you. And the one I picked up actually has a high alarm on it for when it gets too high. I have a preset for when it gets too high. For example, my tanks are set at 79 degrees, and I have the alarm set for 83 degrees. If it reaches 83 degrees, the alarm will go off. And then the opposite is true if it gets too cold. I have the cold side setting at 74 degrees, so if it falls below 274 degrees or lower, the alarm will go off on the controller. So having a temperature controller is vitally important. So these are the top 10 things that I had found to be very helpful and lessons that I had learned through the years. I don't know if this will help you or not, but some of you may or may not be able to relate to it. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I don't really have any more. I would appreciate it if you would take a moment to go to that comment section and comment on the video. Go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, that would be great. It helps me out tremendously. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am out. Have a great day. Bye.